The air was thick with the smell of pine, damp earth, and the cold bite of early autumn. In the heart of a dense, ancient forest, where sunlight barely filtered through the thick canopy, two creatures moved through the underbrush. The forest was alive with the whispers of the wild, leaves rustling, branches creaking, the soft padding of paws against the forest floor. But there was an unmistakable tension in the air today, a quiet unease that settled deep in the bones of those who roamed here. At the center of the woods, beyond the reach of human civilization, the forest had grown untamed and unyielding. It was a sanctuary of sorts, a place where animals could live without the threat of human interference. Yet, in this quiet world, a delicate balance existed between hunter and hunted, between predator and prey. And today that balance was about to be tested. A large grizzly bear, its fur matted with the earth of the forest floor, lumbered through the thickets. Its massive paws left deep impressions in the soft soil as it moved with surprising grace for such a powerful creature. Its nose twitched, sensing the familiar scent of a carcass. Fresh, but not too fresh. The bear had been roaming this stretch of forest for days, driven by an insatiable hunger. In the past, this had been easy work, finding a carcass, feasting on the bounty, and retreating into the shadows. But today, something felt different. Nearby, a lone wolf moved with purposeful stealth. Its coat, silver gray and sleek, blended seamlessly with the shadows of the forest. Its amber eyes were sharp, scanning the area with a quiet intensity. The wolf had been tracking the bear for hours now. It had learned the bear's patterns, its pace, and its habits. The wolf was not looking for a confrontation. No, it was too clever for that. But it knew this forest, and it knew that the grizzly's presence was a sign of something more. As the bear moved closer to the carcass, its nose twitching in anticipation, the wolf crept closer, its paws soundless against the pine needle-covered ground. The wolf's muscles were coiled, ready to spring at a moment's notice. It was a patient creature, one that understood the rhythm of the wild, when to fight, when to wait, when to retreat. The bear reached the carcass, a deer that had been taken down by a smaller predator, and began to feast. The wolf, observing from a distance, waited. It had no intention of challenging the bear head-on, but the opportunity to claim a piece of the kill was too tempting to ignore. The pack was waiting, hungry, and the wolf knew that timing was everything. But as the minutes passed, something began to shift. The forest grew eerily still. The bear, engrossed in its meal, didn't notice the change, but the wolf did. A faint sound, a rustle in the underbrush, caught its attention. The wolf's muscles tensed, its fur bristling. It was a sound it had heard before, the approach of another predator. Another bear? No, this was something else. The air seemed to hold its breath. Out of the shadows emerged a second wolf, larger and more muscular than the first. Its coat was a deep, midnight black, and its eyes glowed with an eerie ferocity. The wolf did not hesitate. It was no ordinary pack member. It was the leader, the alpha, and its presence immediately changed the dynamics of the scene. The first wolf's body language shifted, a subtle tension in its posture, a shift in its gaze. It had been hunting alone, but now the pack had arrived. The alpha wolf didn't make a sound as it approached the grizzly bear's kill. The bear, sensing the shift, lifted its massive head, its sharp eyes narrowing. There was a flicker of recognition, a silent acknowledgement between predator and predator. The bear, though powerful, was alone. It was no match for the pack. The first wolf, the one that had been tracking the grizzly for hours, waited at a distance, observing. Its instincts told it to stay low, to keep its presence hidden for as long as possible. The alpha, however, moved with purpose, its body taut with aggression. Then, without warning, the bear growled. a deep guttural sound that shook the trees around it. The wolf's eyes locked onto the bear's, and for a moment time seemed to stand still. A standoff as old as the earth itself, neither predator willing to yield. But something was wrong. Something was off. The wolf's attention wavered for a brief second, and in that moment a third presence made itself known. From the trees above something moved, something swift, silent. The wolf and the bear both turned their attention toward the sky. A hawk, no, a raven, dove through the branches, its wings flapping loudly in the sudden silence. The bird's shadow passed over the forest floor, and that was all it took. In an instant, the first wolf's gaze was distracted and the bear lunged. A fight erupted, chaotic and brutal. The bear's claws slashed through the air, connecting with the wolf's side. The wolf darted away, its agility its greatest asset as it weaved between the trees, narrowly avoiding the bear's deadly swipe. The wolf retaliated, its jaws snapping at the bear's thick fur, but the grizzly's raw power was overwhelming. But then, just as suddenly as the battle had begun, a new twist emerged. The sound of a distant howl echoed through the forest, sharp and piercing. It was a call, a warning. The second wolf, the alpha, recognized it immediately. It was another pack, one that had been hunting in this part of the woods for days. The situation had escalated beyond a simple territorial dispute. The alpha knew it had to make a decision. The bear, sensing the change, hesitated. The wolf, battered but not defeated, knew it had but one chance. The pack was coming. The grizzly was not only fighting for survival now, it was fighting for its life. The wolf sprinted toward the trees, its body aching from the fight, its instincts screaming at it to retreat. The alpha followed, its movements as smooth as the night. The bear, sensing the pack's arrival, bellowed once more, a sound filled with rage and fear, but it was already too late. The wolves were gone, and the forest had returned to its unsettling quiet. The air was thick with the tension of what had transpired. The forest, once again, stood still. In the days that followed, no one spoke of the battle, no one acknowledged the close call, but the wolves, with their pack intact, had won. The grizzly, its pride shattered, retreated deeper into the forest, wounded and wary. Yet, the forest would always remember the clash of talon and claw, the unspoken war that raged in the wild, a war where victory was not always guaranteed, and survival depended on more than just strength. It was about knowing when to fight and when to fade into the shadows, waiting for the next battle to come. Days passed, and the forest slowly began to reclaim its peace. The wounded grizzly, nursing its pride in its body, retreated further into the heart of the wild, where few dared to tread. It was a place where even the fiercest creatures hesitated, where the trees grew so dense and the underbrush so thick that the sun could hardly pierce through. There, the bear could lick its wounds, heal, and find solace in solitude. But the pack of wolves moved differently now. The silence between them had grown thicker, and the air felt charged, as if the events of the past days had left an imprint on their souls. The alpha, ever vigilant, paced at the edge of their territory, his senses sharp, his mind never at ease. He had led his pack to victory, but the cost was not lost on him. The encounter with the bear had been more than a test of strength. It had been a reminder of the fragility of survival. The wild was never predictable, and the wolves understood this better than anyone. The first wolf, the one who had followed the grizzly's trail with patience and precision, spent more time alone, perched atop a ridge overlooking the dense forest. From here, it could see the vast expanse of the sanctuary, the rippling rivers, the towering trees, and the unbroken landscape. The wolf's amber eyes scanned the horizon, searching for movement, listening for any sound that might betray the presence of another threat. But the forest had grown quiet again, almost unnervingly so. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the forest floor, the wolf caught something not quite right. A flicker of movement in the distance, a disturbance in the usual rhythm of the wild. Its ears pricked, and a low growl rumbled from its chest as it slipped silently into the underbrush, its body blending with the shadows. It was not the bear. No, this was something else. Something new. The wolf's instincts were sharp, honed through years of surviving the forest's endless challenges. But there was an edge of doubt now, a wariness that had never been there before. The events of the past days had changed it, and as it crept closer to the source of the disturbance, its heart began to race. Not with fear, but with the anticipation of something unknown. It wasn't long before it found the source of the disturbance, another predator, one that the wolf had never encountered before in this part of the woods. The creature was large, almost as big as the bear, but it was more agile, more calculated in its movements. Its coat was a patchwork of browns and grays, and its eyes glowed with an eerie, cold intensity. It was a mountain lion, a rare visitor to these parts, one that had ventured from higher, harsher ground in search of easier prey. The wolf hesitated, observing from behind a thick cluster of ferns. The mountain lion, unaware of the wolf's presence, prowled slowly through the forest, its movements deliberate. It too was hunting, but the wolf was certain it hadn't yet noticed the wolf's pack nearby. The alpha wolf, aware of the mounting tension in the air, had sent his scouts ahead earlier in the day to scout for signs of trouble. Now those scouts, two younger wolves, had picked up the trail of the mountain lion. The alpha's instincts kicked in immediately, and he moved with stealth and precision, guiding the pack into position without making a sound. The first wolf, still watching from its vantage point, could hear the faint rustling of the pack moving silently through the underbrush. They were ready, they had to be, but the question remained, could they handle this new threat? As the mountain lion continued its trek, its attention now focused on the scent trail it had picked up. Something much smaller, a deer perhaps? It turned its back to the approaching wolves. It was too late for the mountain lion. The pack was already in position. The first wolf, watching closely, saw the alpha wolf take the lead, his body low to the ground, his muscles rippling beneath his sleek fur. The younger wolves followed, keeping a tight formation, their eyes glinting with excitement. The time for stealth was over. The time for action had arrived. In one swift, coordinated movement, the alpha wolf lunged. The mountain lion whipped around, its claws extended, its fangs bared. But the wolf was faster. The first wolf, the one that had tracked the grizzly days earlier, darted forward, flanking the mountain lion on one side while the alpha attacked from the other. The mountain lion growled, swiping at the air with its claws, but it was overwhelmed by the speed and precision of the wolf pack. The battle was swift and brutal. The mountain lion fought back with every ounce of strength it had, its claws cutting through the air with deadly force. But the wolves were relentless. The alpha and the first wolf worked in perfect synchrony, driving the mountain lion further back, forcing it toward the edge of the forest. Then, just as quickly as it had begun, the battle paused. The mountain lion, realizing it was outmatched, made one final desperate attempt to escape. It darted toward a narrow gap between two trees, its body slipping through the tight space. But the wolves were quick, and they closed in just as the mountain lion reached the gap. In that moment, there was no more room for doubt. The alpha wolf lunged forward, sinking its teeth into the mountain lion's flank. The first wolf, too, joined the attack, and together they brought down the once feared predator. When the dust settled, the forest was still again, the tension ebbing away into the crisp evening air. The mountain lion lay still, its eyes empty, its body limp. The wolves, breathing heavily from the exertion, stepped back, and stood in a circle around their fallen prey. They had survived once more. The first wolf, bloodied but resolute, stood tall among its pack. It looked toward the horizon, its amber eyes reflecting the last rays of the setting sun. There was no time for celebration. The forest was an ever-changing battlefield, and they would need to be ready for whatever came next. The battle between talon and claw had been fought and won, but the wild never truly rests. And as the first wolf turned back to join its pack, it knew that tomorrow and every day after would bring new challenges. In the wilderness, survival was never guaranteed, but it was always earned. As the pack settled into a quiet vigil around their prey, the sky shifted. A deep orange hue stained the horizon, and the last light of the day filtered through the dense canopy. The wolves stood still, their breathing slow, each one processing the weight of the encounter in its own way. The first wolf, still standing apart from the group, gazed at the fallen mountain lion. The animal had been strong, a worthy adversary, but there had been a vulnerability, an opening that they had exploited together. The wolf's amber eyes lingered on the lifeless body, the stillness of the forest amplifying the gravity of what had transpired. In the silence that followed the battle, the wolf could almost hear the beating of its own heart, steady, unwavering. The alpha wolf, with his commanding presence, glanced back at the pack. His gaze was firm, but there was no arrogance. He understood the true cost of their survival. The wild did not grant victories easily. Every moment was a battle, every day a fight to stay alive. It was a cycle that was unyielding. He gestured with his head, and one of the younger wolves stepped forward, nudging the mountain lion's body. The pack knew what to do. This kill would feed them, sustain them through the coming days when food would be scarce. Yet there was an unspoken understanding between them all. The presence of the mountain lion, the fierce predator that had wandered into their territory, was no coincidence. Nature had its way of keeping the balance, and every threat, whether from talon or claw, was part of the intricate web of survival. The wolves had claimed victory today, but the forest was not done with them. As nightfall crept upon the forest, the air grew cooler and the wolves began to break off in pairs, retreating to their usual resting places. The alpha remained standing for a moment longer, looking out into the forest as though seeking something in the shadows. The first wolf, who had fought beside him, lingered for a second, its eyes meeting the alpha's for a brief moment. Then the first wolf turned and followed the others, disappearing into the safety of the trees. The moon rose high in the sky, casting silver beams across the forest floor. The dense canopy above allowed only a fraction of the light to break through, leaving the earth bathed in dark shadows. The wolves curled up in their dens, tucked safely beneath the roots of great trees and within the deep hollows of the forest. But the first wolf couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching, waiting. It lay awake, ears twitching with every movement, every sound that broke the silence. In the distance, the hoot of an owl echoed through the night, its call distant yet familiar. The rustle of leaves stirred by the wind was the only other sound that filled the air, but it wasn't enough to calm the unease that had settled in the first wolf's chest. It could feel the weight of something, an ancient presence looming in the depths of the forest. The wolf's instincts were sharp, and it trusted them. It rose from its resting place and padded silently through the forest, moving with the fluidity of a shadow. The underbrush parted easily as it navigated through the thick trees, its senses alert to every sound, every movement. The forest was alive, always alive, but tonight it felt different. The first wolf made its way toward the old oak, a massive tree whose roots spread like veins throughout the forest floor. It had passed this tree countless times before, but tonight something drew it closer. There, beneath the twisted roots, was a small clearing, a place where the earth was soft and the scent of the wild was thick. The wolf stopped at the edge of the clearing, its body tense. Its eyes scanned the area, searching for anything out of place. And then it saw it. A faint movement, a shadow passing swiftly between the trees. The wolf's muscles tensed, ready for whatever threat might emerge from the darkness. The figure moved again, too quickly for the wolf to track. The first wolf's heart began to race as it watched, its senses heightening. There was something predatory in the way the figure moved, something familiar yet unknown. The wolf growled low in its throat, an instinctual warning to whatever lurked just out of sight. Then it happened. A figure lunged from the darkness, its massive body almost blending into the shadows, its eyes glowing with an intense, unnatural light. It was unlike anything the wolf had ever seen. Larger than a bear, more agile than any predator in the forest, it was a creature born of the night itself. Its fur was a deep, midnight black, its claws sharp as knives, and its teeth gleamed in the moonlight.